Hello, legends. Today, I catch up with a very new friend of mine, an incredible human being. His name is Dain Walker. He's the founder and CEO of Rivyl, which is a very highly renowned branding agency. He himself is actually one of the global leaders and influencers in personal branding. This guy has a huge following. He's an expert in that topic. He's also an author, as most influencers are. He's written a book called The 90-Day Brand Plan, which takes you from zero to powerful personal brand in 90 days. I'm about halfway through it. It's incredible. He's overcome great adversity in his life, particularly in his younger years. He's a very good new friend of mine. Enjoy the show. Dain Walker. Here we are. But at this point, me and you were just switching each other's podcasts.
Yeah, we're friends at this point.
Just through podcasting.
Podcast pals.
Podcasting, boa eventing, and now you're part of CUWC. So now we're really friends.
Yeah. My next goal is to stay on your couch one time.
Yeah.
I'll make it official.
No, please leave my couch alone. But it's great to have you on my show this time. Well, actually, why don't you mention your podcast for the listeners so everyone can go check it out?
Yeah, man. We've I think we're about 23 or 24 episodes in. We started a podcast called The Agency Pod. And we've just been having fun with it. I think, where else do you get to really hang out with people and deep dive into topics that you find interesting? And where else do you get access to people like that? So it's more of a curious journey for me than anything else. Isn't
that cool about podcasts, how it really is like a networking tool? Like podcasting is a great way to easily gain access to like high profile people that otherwise may not actually meet with you.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. Like when we started doing it, we had a list of people that we would like to get on the pod. Even when we went to the US, and we were like, there's no way people will be that receptive to spending 2 hours of their day traveling and speaking to us. But it was kind of shocking. And then when you get to sit down with them, it's not just like over the table, general conversation. You get to really deep dive into topics that they otherwise wouldn't really talk about. And I think it's really interesting that you can really unpack someone's life in 2 hours and have them be completely comfortable with it. So, I've learned so much more in the conversations I've had on these pods than really anywhere else, even paid mentorship.
And you're having big guests as well, like you, like me.
Yeah, we've had you, man. You crushed it. We've had Lewis Howes, we've had Chris Doe, we've had Sabri Subi, Bradley, and a few other characters.
Fred Shibesta.
Fred Shibesta was huge. And it's always kind of shocking, like when you get a billionaire sitting across the couch from you who's just happy to hang out, play Mortal Kombat afterward, and deep dive into a couple different topics.
I was dying of in hysterics. I was at the farm over the weekend. It was my birthday on Saturday.
Happy birthday.
And thank you. And all my family was there, like my closest cousins and aunties and uncles and things. And we were we were watching the promo video you guys made for my episode of your podcast.
Yeah.
And I was laughing because in that it's the best video, because I'm basically saying, I'm like, if you don't have community, you literally die.
It was such a good hook, and we're like, we have to use that. That's the headline.
My cousins were all dying. It's true. It's definitely true. Like I believe that with all my heart, but it was just so funny to hear it.
They're like, what else has he said on this pod?
It's a serious podcast.
Yeah.
But anyway, podcasting is awesome.
I think you were like 3 coffees in, so you were just absolutely
I was peaking. I was about to shoot through the ceiling. And tell me, so Rivyl, have you recently just got to Australia, or what's your situation?
Oh man, I grew up here.
You grew up in Australia?
Yeah.
So what's with the accent?
Yeah, weird. I think I've kind of puzzled it together. And just real quick, as a kid, I was in and out of foster care, in and out of domestic violence from my households. And we moved over to, I went to 36 different schools as a kid. I just moved a lot. And I was very introverted. And I just resorted to like movies and pop culture. And I think, as a kid, most of the things that I looked up to, like Jim Carrey and what have you, had these thick American accents. And I was learning more from movies and pop culture than I was from my own family. So I think I adopted this at a very young age. It didn't help when I was a teenager. Most of my friends were Americans. So then it just kind of continued. And now I'm just stuck with this weird mix of American Australianisms, and people can't figure out what it is.
I actually think it makes you seem like even more legit. You're like, wow, he's American. He
Like,
must
where's
be.
this guy from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. Well, I went to an American high school, and like about 6 months in, I was getting bullied for saying locker instead of locker, and car instead of car, like all that stuff. And my accent literally changed to the point. Then my mum started teasing me.
You can't get away from it,
Why
man.
are you speaking American?
You get bullied there. You come home, you get bullied. Yeah.
But so what was? Tell me more about Rivyl then. What was the origin story, and how did you become? Because right now you're one of the most kind of prominent branding experts, influencers, and thought leaders.
I'll take it.
Personal branding, corporate branding, all of that. Literally everyone I speak to knows who you are. And that all started from you starting Rivyl, or what was the origin story?
Yeah, so it was 2019, and I just gone through a couple different sales jobs. One was selling vacuums. Before that was selling insurance, and then I was selling gym memberships at World Gym. And I was looking at going in and potentially owning my own World Gym. I was like, that's the plan. That's my business. That didn't really kind of go according to plan. And then ended up Telstra, just, shorthand job just to pay the bills. Knowing I wanted to start a business and trying to figure out how do I pay off my 200K debt and all the rest of it. And a friend of mine knew I was a big fan of Gary Vee. I'd always been into personal development, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, reading books, Robert Kiyosaki. Whenever I could afford to go to a seminar, I would. And I had a 2-year stint doing MLM, which was very personal development oriented. And I'd created a downline organization of 2,600 people in MLM and traveled.
What is MLM?
MLM, so multi-level marketing. Also direct selling. So it might be things like Amway, Herbalife, Isogenics kind of stuff. The one I joined was called ACN, and that was selling mobile phone plans, electricity, so on. So I would sell these contracts, and I had 18,000 clients underneath my MLM brand where people would pay a bill and I would get a percentage of that bill. And it would go through Vodafone or Optus or what have you. And
like one of those pyramid scams.
Yeah, it's a pyramid scam. It's legal. It's called direct selling. But yeah, I did that for 2 years, and I picked up a lot of like business acumen in that because I was around a lot of people that ran companies, and I would travel with them, and I would speak on stage, and I'd run events and stuff like that. So I kind of got a bit of a knack for what business is and how it functions, all under this kind of system that I was working within. And it was all about board. It was all legal, and it was like with companies like Telstra, Vodafone, Ergon Energy. These were the contracts and the services that we were selling, or NBN as well. But what happened was, after that, I went through these different sales jobs. I collected a lot of debt because I was a bit stupid when I was young. I had $200,000 debt, and I was like, okay, I can clearly not pay off this debt working 9 to 5. It was going to take me like 10 years. So then I was like, okay, I got to start a business of some kind. MLM or multi-level marketing is not for me. Maybe the gym might be, then that wasn't. And then a friend of mine said, hey dude, Gary Vee's coming to Brisbane. I was like, cool. Big fan of Gary Vee. But I said to him, I was like, I don't really have the funds to make it there. And he goes, dude, it's Gary Vee. And I was like, okay, pressure. Sure, I'll come. And I went there, and it was one of those events where people are speaking all day for like 8 hours. It's like a pitch marathon, like buy my $15,000 boot camp, buy my $15,000 boot camp. And then the funny thing is, Gary comes up at the end, and he gets up on stage, and the first thing he says is like, what's up, Brisbane? I'm not here to sell you shit. And the crowd goes crazy. And the crowd had been sleeping all day, and all of a sudden they were electrified, standing on their chairs, recording him with their phones. And I'd just had a moment of reality where I was like, what's happening here? Like, nobody cared about the other guests, as no matter how big their names were, but everyone cared about Gary. And, I was like, maybe it's his content. Maybe it's because he's not trying to sell anything. He did a 10-minute cover of his story and like how he grew up in Belarus and his parents were immigrants and all the rest of it. And then he just did Q&A for 2 hours and crushed it. And I just left there feeling invigorated, like building a business right then and there was totally possible if I just wanted to start. So on the drive home, I said to my fiance, I don't really kind of understand where this came from. I just said, I'm going to start an agency tonight. And she was like, cool. So we get home. I asked if I could spend part of our grocery money to download Adobe and some different software. And she's like, cool, we'll just leave off Megarang. It's nothing that we're at that point in time unfamiliar with. And
you're probably better off not eating.
yeah, dude. Yeah. And then I just started DMing people. Hey, what's up? I just started an agency doing design. And I was just DMing people on Facebook. Like, do you need a logo? Do you need a business card? Do you need a poster? And the next day I had 16 DMs or so. And I just started talking to people and selling $50 projects here and there. That's how it kind of started. And then within the next 2 weeks, I was online looking up, what should I do with content creation? And I stumbled across Chris Do, and then I went to his Instagram, and he was creating carousels at the time, which were like these swipeable educational pieces of content. And I looked at that and I was like, well, I used to teach when I did MLM. I used to teach sales, teach tactics. Maybe I could just teach stuff through this like new format on Instagram and just have fun with that. So it was more, I'm enjoying the process of creating and teaching and then just putting it on the internet. And then 2 weeks later, I had so many DMs for people asking me, can I do similar content for them, that I was able to start planning to quit my job. And 6 or 8 weeks in, I was making more money creating content for others internationally than I was at Telstra. So I quit and I started to work for myself as a freelancer. I had an agency at that time called Victory Front, which was just, me pretending like I have an outfit. And a year in, I started hiring people. And then about a year and a half in, we rebranded to Rivyl, which is what we have now. And, for the last 4 coming up to 5 years, it's just been producing content as a personal brand to just teach the masses with no catch. Like, here's how you brand, here's how you design, here's how you sell. And then on the back end of that, all the interest that comes from that for, hey, can you design for me? Can you help me come up with a strategy? Can you help me brand? I siphon that energy over to Rivyl, and then Rivyl takes them on board as a client. So we've literally built the agency from 0 to 30 people from the interest that my Instagram generated for clientele.
Isn't it amazing now how many businesses have started because someone built a strong profile on a social media platform like Instagram?
It's crazy. Like, to me, I still scratch my head. I'm like, can't be that easy. And I think, maybe it was I caught that particular wave at that particular time, but then as the algorithm changes, we just adapt and we do just as well. And I think purely it's from just giving value. If you can just give value, there's no catch. You're like, I'm here to help you, and you can create a bit of a tribe or a community that adore you. A small percentage of them are going to want to buy something.
And the other thing is, everyone talks about like these waves and, oh, he was lucky or they were lucky because they caught that wave when Instagram was good or whatever, or Instagram was growing and the reach was good. But I mean, catching waves, anyone can catch one wave, but if you become a seasoned surfer,
yeah,
you know how to catch some waves, and you can see when the waves are coming, how long the break is, the better you become at business, the better you become at catching waves. And sometimes it's that first wave that you get that may have been lucky. Like, it may have just been the luck of time, but that first wave gave you that experience or gave you that push that it then enables you to think, oh, okay, what's the next wave? And you actually get better at it. And it's so funny because really the moral of that whole story was you started your business because you're in debt.
Desperation, survival mode. Yeah.
Well, there were 2 things that I took from it. One was that you had a need, like you needed money because you're in debt. So you hadn't, like, I need to start a business because it's the only way I'm going to get out of $200K worth of debt. I want to find out what you were buying, but $200K worth of debt. Probably video games.
Just stupid things, man, like a car loan and just other things. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get back to it. But so you had a need, but then that need almost met like an inspirational moment, like in your Gary Vee experience. And, a lot of people can have different inspirational moments, but that was a moment for you where you obviously, like you even said, it was like, oh, I can actually start a business today if I want to. Like that, it's kind of like people need a need, and then they need like something that lights the fire, like a little bit of, what's that spark when you're lighting fire? A little bit of kindle with a little ember.
A little bit of heat, man. I think there's an old tale where it's like, there's 2 old men sitting on a porch in rocking chairs, and there's a dog on the porch. I don't know if you've heard this story. The dog's groaning, and one of the men says, why is he upset? The other old man says he's laying on a nail. The dog keeps groaning, and then the first old man says, why doesn't he just get up? And the second old man says, it doesn't hurt enough yet. for me, I was that dog in that situation. I was in pain, but I wasn't in enough pain yet. And I think what happened when I went to the live event, something happened earlier that day was Grant Cardone was on stage speaking, and he was selling a boot camp. And I got excited. I'm like, okay, if I just do Grant Cardone's boot camp, that'll be sweet. That'll solve my problems. And I ran over to the side of the room, and this is like in the middle of the day at the same event with Gary Vee. And I was like, I'll just come up with a payment plan. It's all sweet. Like in my naivete, I was like, let's figure that out, right? It's 15 grand. I'll pay it off. And I go over to the kiosk, and the girl's there, and I was like, hi. And she's like, hi. And I was like, can I do a payment plan? Kind of like timidly and embarrassed. And she's like, sure. It's like $2,000 a fortnight or something like that. And I was just like, I was like, I can't do it. And my fiance Ellie was right next to me at that moment, and she went to the bathroom. And I didn't find this out till later, but she was so embarrassed because we combined our debt together, and the 200,000 was like both of our debts like consolidated together. She had like a Nissan Patrol, and I had like a nice car, and it was mainly the cars and other loans to like pay off debts and things. And she went to the bathroom and cried for an hour because she felt so guilty that we're in this situation, and she blamed herself. And at that point in time, my experience was like embarrassment. I'm like, dude, I can't even do this thing I want to do. And it might sound childish or like I was throwing a tantrum, but I was just so angry at that moment. It was almost like that nail got so painful at that very moment that I decided like, I can't handle this anymore.
I can't even afford the solution to my problem.
I can't even afford the solution to my problem, right? And this is maybe the narrative I built up in my head, which wasn't particularly correct. But I remember I was like, do I leave? Do I just go home? Like, screw it, And then I went and just sat back down and had my arms crossed and was kind of huffing and puffing for the rest of the event. But that's when Gary came out and really hit me on the nose, because he said something else in that keynote, which is, you don't need these boot camps. You just need to go fucking start. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear. The nail was so painful at that moment. And then Gary saying, you just need to start, was like, okay, maybe that's just the thing I need to do. Maybe I need to stop thinking I need a book. I don't need a mentor. I don't need another course or another program or another boot camp. I just need to go work. I've got enough skills. I know how to sell. I know how to design. Maybe it's just time I put, the rubber on the road and do something, rather than waiting and procrastinating, thinking I need some external alternative thing to help me. Maybe I could just help myself. And that was the moment where like the trajectory just changed, and I call it a defining moment. Like when Spider-Man gets bit by the spider, that was the moment where I was like, I'm done. Like the old me is done, and we're going to do things different.
No, you know what you just described too, and I talk about it all the time. It is quite literally a difference between people who start and don't. But what you just described was, it was the moment you realized that you are capable of doing something, that you don't need someone else to do it for you. Before that, your mindset was, I need to buy this or pay this person so that I will be able to achieve this or be able to do this. But that moment, you actually were like, no, I am able to achieve this. I don't need this. Once someone has that mindset, and that mindset is just a mindset of self-belief. That's all it is. Self-belief is the most powerful thing. Every business owner has self-belief, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have started. A lot of people say, I'm very entrepreneurial minded. I think of great ideas, and, I really do want to do something. But you can be as entrepreneurial as you want. If you don't have self-belief, you're not even getting to step one, because thinking of an idea is not step one. There are 2 million people a day think of the same idea. How many of them actually start it that day or the next day? Probably 20.
Yeah, it's like when the guy started Uber and everyone was like, I had that idea. It's like, what did you do?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uber.
I thought of that years ago.
Yeah,
Well, you didn't do anything
Everyone
with
says it to me about carb. Oh, yeah, I was going to do something like that. I was like, yeah, but you didn't.
Yeah, and I did.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
move aside.
Because I believed I could. Because I believed
Yeah.
I could. And that like I've always been so against those what do you call it? When you go and they pitch to you, what's that called? The conferences and things like that. I was
Like the one I went to?
Yeah.
Oh, it was like they always market it as like, grow your business and
Yeah, but what are they called? Anyway, I went to one once.
like a conference or whatever, yeah.
I went to a seminar, that's it. Like a personal development seminar. And don't get me wrong, there's amazing seminars out there. But I went to Anthony Robbins. Sorry, I don't know why that took me so long to think of. But I went to Tony Robbins once with 3 friends. I had actually never heard of him. This was at the start of This was maybe 2-3 years in. I'd never heard of him. And my friend Zoe Marshall, said to me, like, hey, Tony Robbins is coming. Do you want to go? We'll go with Stephen Khalil and Lillian Khalouf, I think it was the group.
And you were like, who's Tony Robbins?
Yeah, I had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I wasn't your typical
treat.
person that was. Well, I mean, Tony Robbins is like a god, is what I learned from that.
I wish I could go back and rediscover him. He's that good.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah. And he's the best at what he does. But the whole experience was people selling the crowd these like 15 grand courses. And I remember thinking, this is actually really sad because these people all obviously have life problems. Like I felt that they were preying on people that have problems and that they're not able to solve the problems themselves. And so they go to these seminars to get help to solve the problems. They end up just getting 15 grand into debt, and I probably guarantee they still have the problem, you know? So whether or not that's true, that's how I felt at the time. Tony actually was, I guess it must be part of the game plan because he did similar to what Gary Vee did. He wasn't necessarily pushing the sale too hard. He was actually giving a lot more value. But I felt that whole ecosystem was built on almost preying on people that have big life problems that they can't get out of and profiting from those life problems and potentially not solving them. That being said, I have never bought the course, so I don't know if it would solve it or not.
Well, I bought the courses before, and to your point, like, I think I've talked to these event owners and there's always a justification. Oh, well, we need to do that to pay for the event. And I'm like, well, what about, like, I think the problem is the perception of the event space in Australia, at least, is it's going to be a sales marathon.
It's American style, though. That's so American.
Yeah. And I think if you go back to, I guess, the real genesis of like seminars, like Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, Dale Carnegie, they would actually deliver a seminar. It wasn't the sales pitch. They'd pitch something at the end. But at some point in time, it's just become the whole 1 hour thing is the sales marathon. And you see people get up and buy it because they're like, oh, well, I guess I can't get the answer here. So then I'll go into the next step. And I think I don't like that. I think if you sell a ticket and you promise something, you deliver it. There's no problem selling something, but just tell people, hey, in an hour or so, I'm going to try and sell you something, and then just leave it there. And people will buy if you're good.
And they need to get enough value. I mean, they've already, the ticket wasn't free. So like, it's kind of like what you were saying before. You believe in providing value. When you provide value, the world gives you back. You know, it's like, how much value can I give to people? And therefore then people will come to me when they need, like, so if I'm giving advice on personal brand, like if I'm you and I'm giving advice on personal branding and I just become, you know, the really biggest thought leader on personal branding, then when anyone wants to build their personal brand, which in these days is so important because it's a big strategic point of difference between people and their business, and it's something you can do very easily with social media platforms and things, then, okay, well, I'm going to go to Dain because he's already been giving me great content for like 2 years. My business is going well now. I want to grow my brand. Why wouldn't I use him? Because he's basically been serving me for the past 2 years for free. You know, like it is and then they're really happy to use you because they're kind of like, oh, thank you. You know, whereas I feel like those seminars was like you paid to then get sold to.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was it was like, oh, why did I pay then? You know, like it was wrong. But anyway.
Well, there's an opportunity in that because what we've done recently is I've been going to a lot of these events and everyone around me is selling. And we go so hard in the paint the other direction where we go up on stage and we give a tremendous amount of value in 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever the time allocated is. And we don't sell anything. And at the end, we put up a QR code and they're like, you can download the whole keynote. It's here. And then we'll put up a recording of it afterwards. We're literally like, here's everything, steal it. And I tell people in the audience, steal my keynote, steal my slide deck, steal a recording, take it, use it, build a business with it. And then what happens is afterward, the feedback is, to the event, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass, but the feedback's been, oh, we wish Dain spoke longer. He was our favorite speaker. This is the feedback we've been getting from other people's events. And it's also been like, you know, he was the only one that gave value. And I get DMs, hundreds of DMs after this. They're like, thank you so much. You're the only person who really brought it today. I really appreciate you so much. I learned from the other speakers, but you gave me something different. I think if you're a speaker or you're looking to get into the circuit, be the one anomaly that is the Gary Vee or the Tony Robbins who just gives, because what happens is you win the crowd, just like Gary did at that event with 5,000 people snoozing. He won 5,000 people's hearts by just giving at the end. and then he walked out a rock star. And I guarantee every single person in that crowd felt moved and either followed him or decided to buy something off him at a later date.
You know what actually the real lesson is? It's be different.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually what the lesson is. It's kind of like, whatever is wrong with the way things are currently done in your space, be different. If networking sucks and you went to networking events and you met people that were really rude and the experience, you were lost, you were standing there in a crowd of people, you didn't know who to talk to, you ended up meeting no one and wasting 2 hours of time, you met maybe a cat breeder or something, if that is networking,
Yeah.
well, boom.
And that's what you've done with CUWC, man.
Exactly my point. Like it's that there was a big problem with the way something was done. CUWC made networking enjoyable, premium, and effective.
You made it cool and sexy. Because I distinctly remember when I first went to my first BOA meeting, which is the little brother to CUWC, I guess.
Yeah, and BOA's done the same thing. Just BOA's done it for CUWC. CUWC is the premium networking market. It made the best premium networking platform there is. BOA's doing the same thing, but to the earlier stage businesses and to the either free or cheap way to network. So BOA is the best free or cheap way to network for any business owner.
I like how you've covered both grounds because people want distinctively both, right? And for example, I recently went to CUWC in Melbourne and we used one of the rooms there for a workshop we were facilitating for a client. The client came and I had not experienced that location before. And for those listening, you walk in and it's like, am I in the Ritz-Carlton or
It's like a hotel.
Am I in the Burj Khalifa? Where am I? This place is grandiose. There's marble everywhere. It's beautifully lit. It's got this gorgeous entrance. There's free coffee and the people there are really helpful. And my clients were like, what the hell is this place? And I'm like, oh, it's a networking event. They're like, we've never been to a networking business event like this in our lives. And it just happened to be an event happening at the same time. And I think, they were just kind of shocked that Mark Burris was there and there's all this stuff happening. But the point is, I've been to so many business networking events in Australia, nothing close to that. You guys have really gone a 180 and ran the other direction.
It's the same as what you've done. And it's really the message I'm trying to, what I'm taking from this conversation so far is really if you're a business owner, what is the norm in your industry in terms of service? And how can you be different in a way that's better? The norm may not even be horrible. Networking was horrible. And I would argue seminars was pretty horrible too. But it doesn't have to be, the industry norm for you or your business norm doesn't have to be horrible. You just need to be better, different.
Yeah. But I think therein is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is this sucks. What's the crux of the issue and how do I do it better? It's like Elon Musk looking at NASA and going, they're plummeting these billion-dollar rockets into the ocean and exploding it. What if we could just land that thing? NASA's can't be done. That's the crux of the issue, can't be done. What if it could be done? What if you could re-entry and recycle rockets? I'm just using that as a radical example, but in the networking...
Because if that's possible, anything's possible. Anything can be fixed.
Think of the hubris of that, just looking at NASA and going, I could do that better. With no credibility whatsoever, just sheer looking at the challenge. That's entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is looking at the impossible and going, what if I had to, how would I do it? If I could do it, what would it be? You did that with the social space within the networking space, and you're like, if I had to do this different, if I had to have a better setting, cooler staff, a nicer venue, whatever it is, how would we do it? And people might have debated with you, it's not profitable, people aren't going to want to pay that much, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and we even heard at the start, I got told and I was really young when CUWC first started. So I was being told, oh, that's been tried. So heaps of people have tried that. Oh, I joined one that was at this place once, but they're shut now. They don't work. So many people told me that it's just, that doesn't work in Australia. And in my head, I was just kind of well, I have never tried it. And I was like, I think I can make it work. And it's that self-belief thing that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. And in terms of be different, it's not just about innovating your market, but that's a key element of branding, no?
Yeah, I think, Steve Jobs had a favorite book from Marty Neumeier, and it was the book called Zag. And the reason Steve Jobs loved Marty Neumeier was, imagine software stores in the 80s. The stores back then, I don't know if you remember this, going into a software store and you would buy like a motherboard, and then you would buy the box with
Nah,
Adobe
man.
in it.
I never did that. I had a Game Boy with Pokemon Red, and that was it.
There you go.
That
man.
was the extent
That was
of
my.
my
I had
technology.
the blue. I had the blue. That was my favorite. But like, yeah, if you Google it, like, look up software stores in the 80s. It was a thing, right? It was like Blockbuster Video. It doesn't exist anymore. But what happened was all the boxes would look ultra tech, ultra businessy, and then Steve Jobs just had a white book with a rainbow apple on it. Just different, right? So whatever anyone else is doing, do it different. And I think, to your point, right, it doesn't have to be innovation. It could just be differentiation. Differentiation might be like, if you take a water bottle brand, like, Fiji or whatever the different water bottle brands are, Pump, and you go, how do we be different? Well, instead of putting it in a clear plastic bottle, what about if we put it in a can? Instead of making it look tranquil, what if we made it look gnarly? Then you have brands like Liquid Death. It's just water in a can, but it's so radically different that a different tribe are much more likely to buy the can version versus the tranquil version because it's cool. So it's like, pick your market, because in your case, you're like, okay, business people want to network, but they're in a setting where it's kind of dull. It's kind of fuddy-duddy. It's just not cool. How do we make it cool? How do we make it sexy? How do we make it more transparent and less transactional and more experiential?
More organic. And why is it so important for people to have a strong personal brand?
Personal branding, yeah, this is a good point, because I think the difference between company branding and personal branding is there's a few things. I think if you look at social media and how social media operates, because it's a great platform of how personal branding really works. If you think about this, when you go on social media and you just go for a scroll, the people that you follow, why do you follow them? There's only ever two reasons. A, you want to be like them, or B, you feel like you're already like them. You share the same perspective on the world. You both love, collecting Smurfs, or you both love Magic the Gathering, or you both love, playing Call of Duty at 1 a.m. Whatever, like, you both see the same thing the same way. You both love the same things. You both share similar personalities and perspectives of the world. Like, we go onto social media to socialize. Rarely do people go on social media and they're like, man, I wonder what Coca-Cola are up to today, right? We predominantly follow people. And if you look at social media accounts, like if you go to Gary Vee's account, he has like 15 million followers, but then his company, VaynerMedia, that produces just the same amount of content for probably near the same amount of time, has 200,000 followers. Virgin versus Richard Branson, Tim Cook versus Apple. The personal brands always have way more engagement, way more followers, way more attention from their audience than a company does. And I think that's because personal branding is about your character, whereas a company is more about like what you're capable of doing. So Apple's capable of giving me an iPhone. Tim Cook is capable of telling me a story and connecting with me on something that he's doing, right? Gary Vee is able to motivate me with something that happened to him. But VaynerMedia can sell, a Toyota. It can sell a, can of Pepsi or whatever it is. They can promote, advertise. Company branding is about capability. Personal branding is about character. Company branding is really about like being transactional and also trying to offer people something that can help solve their problem. Whereas being a personal brand is about being conversational. Let's tell stories. Let's share ideas. Let me entertain you. Let me educate you. It's an exchange. Companies aren't usually in the business of exchanging free value. Rarely. You might get a Red Bull. You might get a Liquid Death. You might get these random outliers. But for most scenarios, businesses aren't usually giving out much for free.
What's in a way Red Bull would give free value?
They put on wild events where essentially they, there's that one in the Netherlands where I think, people are trying to fly their own. They have this really hilarious event where I can't remember what it's called, but these people submit their vehicles and then they run the vehicles off a ramp and they try to see how far they can fly and they can win a prize. And it's ridiculous. You can look this up online. Red Bull put on a lot of events where they're just trying to entertain. They're trying to push the human limits. And, Baumgartner, the guy that jumped out of space from that pod and like re-entered into the earth, like Red Bull spent like $30 million on that campaign just to show you what humans are capable of doing. They're out there just trying to pioneer the human spirit and they're trying to entertain you. Whereas, what have Fiji water done for us recently? You know, what have these other brands done? This is why Prime is exploding, because Logan Paul's a personality. KSI is a personality. We care a lot more about these characters than we care about their drink. If I launch Prime or you launch Prime, no one would really care anywhere near as much as they would care the fact that Logan Paul did it. You know
Prime
what I mean?
for business owners.
Let's try and launch our own energy drink. But the point is, I think, you know, we as human beings are inherently attracted to storytelling, where it's the hero's journey and it's primal. We're tribal creatures. We're not transactional creatures.
Do you know what I've never thought about before? I never thought about it in the way you described it before when talking about the fact that it's social media, is that, yeah, you're right. You only really follow people that you want, if you don't know them, that you want to be like, or whom you think you're already like, or you relate to. And when you think about real life, like, who are you friends with? Well, they're people that you relate to and that you have maybe common ethics, morals, or interests with. Or they're people that you want to be like mentors, or people that inspire you, or people that are experts in that you share the same passion as you. Like it really is real life friendship, or it's real life relationship building digitally. And also in real life, we're in the business of relationship building. How relationships built, they're built through shared value. So like, you know, I'll help you out, then you'll help me out. And then we go for lunch and we get along really well. And like, I know even more about you and we have a lot in common because we're both business owners and we both have this problem before. And then I help you again and then you help me again. And now bang, we're not just friends, we're really strong allies. That really is how you have to approach your digital character. It is, like you said, character. That's what you're sharing, your character. It's like, who are you and what do you think? You know, and what do you do? And people need to know you online so that they can either aspire to be like you, or in all ways, or in some, or be like, I'm just like this person. I think like them. I act like them. I agree with them. I'm going to follow them, and they're giving me value as they would need to in real life if we were becoming friends. You know?
Yeah, because I think in that there's a relationship. You know, whether it's a virtual experience, or
it
like
is a relationship.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you look at social media from a personal branding perspective, it's about creating currency. So, you know, imagine the way you look at like the amount of crypto coins there are. I'm not a crypto guy, but like if you think about there's thousands of different coins. I think when you're a personal brand creating social media content, you're earning currency, right? That currency is attention. So your tribe are paying attention to you, right? They're giving you their time. That's worth something. And if people are continuously, day after day, giving you a minute and a half on every reel that you post, that's huge. After 6 months, that might be, you know, a room full of, you know, 400,000 people that have paid attention for a minute to something you talked about. That's powerful. That is currency. You can trade that for something. That's why people end up being influencers and getting paid by different brands to like highlight their products. 2 is like, okay, now you have advocacy. So now I have an audience of people who not only know me and pay attention to me, but then they're telling others that I exist. So if they bump into someone that's like, oh man, like I'm having a problem with, you know, trying to get leads for my business. It's like, well, dude, have you heard about Dan and what he's doing with CUWC? No, what's that? Like, this is conversations I've really had recently, Dan. Like I bumped into people and like, I'm struggling to network. I'm like, dude, just download this app. It's called BOA. Come along to the event. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, just show up. You know, I think that's advocacy. That's another currency that your business earns. The more people that are advocating for you, the faster CUWC and BOA are going to scale, right? Next, it's like, okay, well, a small percentage of that attention and a small percentage of that advocacy are then willing to transact with you. They might buy your book. They might come to an event. They might buy a $300 ticket. You know, I think so many times when people go onto social media, they try to go straight to the currency. They don't think about, what am I doing to get attention? How am I promoting that I'm something that they want to become, or I'm something like them? 2, how do I get them to want to advocate? How do I be so good at producing media, content, a podcast, whatever you have, that people are like, I have to share this? You know, when you see a piece of content, Dan, and you're like, I'm going to send this to my wife. This is just going to make her giggle. Or I'm going to send this to my work colleague because he's going through this challenge at the moment and this addresses that challenge. How do you make content so good that it's share worthy, that people are like, I have to send this to like 5 people? It's not one of those ones that you send to one person low key. You're like, this one person would appreciate this. It's one of those ones where you're like, how many other people can I send this to? And I think this is where the currency, people get it wrong. People go straight to the money. They don't think about the attention really, and they don't think about the advocacy really. But that's where the money really is. It's through the attention and it's through the advocacy that the money shows up. You can't just chase the money.
Yeah, this is the dumbest way to ever kind of summarize it, but it's kind of like trying to go straight from an Instagram DM to sleeping with someone.
Yeah, it's too aggressive.
It's too aggressive. Have a conversation first, go for a coffee, maybe then dinner, or a walk, then see each other again. You've almost got to, people can't be too aggressive online. They have to, and it's a mistake actually that we've made before many times and still do. Not me. But as a business, it's very tempting to go straight for the kill, straight for the jugular. Sometimes you have to make it easy for them to take the first step.
Yeah, baby step.
Yeah, and then another step, and then another step, until eventually they've stepped all the way in to a transaction because that was the best decision for them.
Well, think about real life, right? Like how many hours have we spent together? Let's be real honest now.
Well, before?
Probably 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
It takes an average of 15 hours to become an acquaintance. So if we spend another 10 hours together, we might be like, yo, I can really trust this individual. Because we've spent enough time around each other's energy to kind of know what the other person's really about. Because it takes about 15 hours to really get someone.
Yeah, I agree.
Have you ever gone on a first date and then by the 5th date, you're like, who is this person? Right? You're like, what happened to the first date person? Or the first, when you hang out with a friend the first time, you hang out with them the 5th time, you're like, this is a little different. It takes about 15 hours to make an acquaintance, but
barriers
it takes
break down.
Barriers break down. You get to see the real them, and the conversation goes from surface level, how's the weather, to deep and meaningful conversations, right? It takes about 50 hours to make someone a friend, and it takes about, I think it's 150 hours for someone to become a lifelong best friend.
Wow.
So it takes time. So when you're producing media on social media, you're essentially buying a minute, and then another minute, and then another minute. And this is why posting consistently is so important, and doing lives is important, and having a podcast is important, because if I listen to 15 of your podcasts, my unconscious brain doesn't know the difference between you being a real friend or not.
So what is the best way then for someone to build a personal brand? And you've literally written a book on it, so we may as well talk about your book as well.
Yeah, so the book's called The 90-Day Brand Plan. And essentially the book it's really, I wrote it in a way where it's trying to just be a wake-up call. And I think how to build a personal brand, so much of what people have is they have an itch or an idea of a thing. Maybe they have 3 to 10% of their thing figured out, but that's enough. If you go back to the start of my story, I was like, I want to start an agency. Beyond that, I had nothing. I didn't have software. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any income. I had nothing. I was just the hubris of, I'm going to start an agency. That was my 10% idea. The next thing is, okay, well, what's the next step? Well, the next step is I'll download some software so I can make some stuff. Step 3, reach out to people and see who wants something. I didn't have a logo. I didn't have a website. I was just idea plus software plus sales equals client. And I was just executing that. And then once the money starts coming in, it's well, where do I first prioritize this? Maybe I should set up an ABN. And then I should set up a website, and I downloaded a Squarespace and built a Squarespace. You know what I mean? It's step by step. It's 10% idea, and it's just incremental 1% edits back to back to back. And things flopped and failed and blew up in my face and went sideways 1,000 times. But that's entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is cool, adapt, edit, keep going. And, when you're building a business, it's not about having this whole plan figured out. Now, back to personal branding, it's the same. When you produce that first piece of content, most people are terrified. They're concerned about what their friends are going to think. They're concerned about how they're going to look, how they sound, how they, what outfit to wear. They overanalyze and overthink it, just like a business plan. If you just have the idea, turn the camera on and just start filming. And for people that have fear of being filmed or what have you, I just tell them, just get comfortable setting up a tripod and just recording without any intention to post it. Just get comfortable with that dynamic between you and a camera in a room where there isn't anyone. It's just a weird setting to think about. All of a sudden now I'm talking to a blank wall about my ideas. But once you get comfortable enough doing that, eventually then you could just set up an Instagram account, set it to private, invite a few friends that you trust, and just say, I'm going to start tissue testing content. I'm going to post for the next 30 days. just comment and give me feedback on what you like and didn't like. Only I can see it and a few other trustworthy people on that account. You just lock the account. And then what happens is you just get into a rhythm. If you feel comfortable just to go out there in the world and start posting, great, do that. But some people really need to kind of get their sea legs and get comfortable with it. It's just like a first job. You know, when you get your first job, you're nervous. You care what people think about you. You slip up on your words. You make mistakes. The same thing is on Instagram. It's just not trying to be perfect. You don't need a degree. There is no degree in Instagram. It's just get out there, produce something, see how it goes. Personal branding, at the end of the day, it's in the book we describe it. It's like you start a little campfire, and the campfire is your account. And then you put a log on the fire, and that's one piece of content. And one piece of content might last on the algorithm for 2 hours, and then nobody will ever see it ever again unless they go to your account. So the idea is to just keep adding logs to the fire until you start having people show up, stand around the fire and go, this is pretty good. We're pretty entertained by this, or we really like what you're teaching. You know, maybe you're an entertainer, you're playing music. Maybe you're, showcasing the day in the life of, or whatever format it is, you're either entertaining people or educating them or a mix of both. And that's really it. Personal branding is just putting yourself out there and sharing your character, sharing your face, sharing your stories and what you're doing. But therein, that's where the beauty starts to show up, because the tribe will start to say to you, hey, we really like that one piece of content, post more stuff like that. Then you'll catch a wave. The only way to catch a wave is by starting to do something, look at other accounts and what they're doing and try to adapt. And then waves fizzle, and then you just try to read for the next wave. You know, carousels kind of fizzled out after 2 years. Then the next wave was reels. Now we're looking at, okay, how do we capture the day in the life of? And how do we try to capture what it's like to be in a workshop, what it's like to run an agency? How do we formulate that into interesting content? So the next era of my content is another wave altogether, which is allowing people to really kind of be a fly on the wall of what I do. So personal branding at the end of the day is just showcasing what you're doing and giving it away for free with no expectation of what you're going to get in return.
And why is it called 90-day, the 90-day brand? Sorry, what is it called?
The 90-day brand plan. Yeah. So I think it takes about 90 days for you to get into a groove. It's like trying to pick up an instrument. Day one, you're going to suck. That thing, you won't even know how to tune it. You won't know if it sounds any good. You might not even know how to strum. Your fingers start to bleed, right? By day 90 of like learning to play drums or the flute or guitar or kind of anything is enough time for you to get adept at doing the thing. And I think 90 days, for whatever reason on the algorithm, it's a long enough time for you to experiment and get comfortable. It's a short enough time where you can go back to back to back and give it everything you have and then give yourself a break. I like to challenge myself by doing sprints for 90 days. And this has proven itself time and time again. So recently we were like, okay, how do we get myself on stages to do keynotes? So then for 90 days, we're just working our asses off to try to get ourselves opportunities to speak on stage. Once we finish the 90 days, now the opportunities are coming a dime a dozen, and they're easy because everyone's seen all the previous stuff I've done. Now they're inviting me to the next stuff. So I think just set yourself a parameter and a challenge and just go, okay, it's like a fitness challenge, right? For the next 90 days, I'm going to eat this way and I'm going to exercise. And then result at the end is really amplified. The reason I really try to be rigid around the 90 days is most people do spurts of content. They'll post for 4 days. They won't see the result. They'll quit. They'll do it sporadically over the period of 2 or 3 weeks. But you have to compress energy. You have to be extremely consistent for a period of about 90 days to see a dramatic volume of results at the end of that. And also, you want to get the data. If you post every day on the algorithm for 90 days, you can actually go back and look at what happened in 90 days and then reward yourself based on that. If you're like, okay, I was at 500 followers, now I'm at 3,000. Wow, look at me go. So it's just, you want to create data, you want to do a sprint, and you want to put a lot of energy in a compressed time frame together.
It's so funny how just the laws of life extend past business and into life. It's like focus is really, it's a commitment.
Deep focus and commitment.
Yeah,
discipline
like,
to do it.
If you wanted to learn jiu-jitsu and you focused on it for 90 days, you'd learn some jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, you'd be crushing it.
You'd know enough to feel like, oh man, I can keep going now. And it's that start that's the hardest of anything. Like it could even just be starting a business. The start's the hardest part by far. So like with personal branding, it's just the same thing. Like the book is literally, and so does it give them like a roadmap of like, you're committing to 90 days of personal brand building through content creation, and it kind of gives them a roadmap of what to do.
Absolutely, yeah. It's 12 chapters, and each of the first 6 chapters really kind of covers off each of the things that get in the way, like fear, imposter syndrome. What's my niche? What's my thing? How do I experiment? What happens if it doesn't work? Like all of these things that get in our way psychologically, we try to address in the first half of the book. The second half of the book is then, okay, how do you expand and scale? And at the end of each chapter, there's an exercise that you can just do right there in the book. And then we've also got a QR code where you can go, you can go and download additional resources. So we've crammed like a tremendous amount of value into this book. And we tried to make it a wake-up call and a roadmap and a bit of a starting mechanism, because the book's not going to get you, to, let's just say $1 million.
Yeah, you're not going to be Kim Kardashian after.
No, but it's
after
gonna get you going. It's gonna get you started, and it's gonna show you how to think. Because I'm not a big advocate on like what to think. I'd prefer to go, here's a framework of thinking, and here's how to apply it. So for an example, I talk about like, imagine social media like a library. Do you go to the library to see advertisements?
No, I don't go to the library, but I would definitely not go if there were advertisements.
Right. Or think about like, the concept at large is like, I know libraries aren't that cool anymore, but like if you go to the library, people don't go there to be advertised to. They go in there for 2 reasons. I want to learn something and upskill myself, or I want to be wildly entertained and enthralled by a Harry Potter novel or something like that, or Lord of the Rings or what have you. If you look at social media, putting a piece of content up that tries to sell something is the equivalent of putting up a poster in a library that says, please buy my shit. Nobody cares. You have to go out there and write a book, 1 page at a time. And that's what the 90-day brand plan is all about. Like, write a page today in your novel and give it away to your audience, catch free in the library. Because social media is just a library. Right? When you go there, you're curating. You're like, I don't like this stuff.
A place to go for content and information.
And that's what the algorithm
Whether it be
is.
Entertaining or learning.
All the algorithm is like, what topics do you want to read? And I'll just put that stuff in front of you.
You know who's a fucking genius? The inventor of the library. Think about it.
Oh,
How
yeah.
ahead of time that was. And not just
Cutting
that.
edge.
Yeah, but not just that. But it's also like, why does it exist? It's like, well, it's a cheaper way to like access all this information and books than buying all the books. And it's kind of like, well, it was like Netflix before there was Netflix.
Like the Library of Alexandria. Like, I think...
I've never thought about how smart it was before. You've blown my mind.
Dude, there's a book, I'll get it for you. It's called The Library. And it's spooky, and it talks about how libraries are living organisms. This book like rattled me, and I don't know why I bought it, but I was reading it and I was like, yeah, like libraries have been the heartbeat of humanity for 5,000 years or however long scrolls or whatever have existed. Because
they were our internet before there was internet.
That's it.
The library is powerful.
So Alexandria, think about it at the time, dude, that was the center of the world. That was
the world's knowledge.
That was the world's knowledge in one location. And people would travel, get this, people would travel by donkey back for years just to go there, just to read something, because books and scrolls weren't accessible. So people would literally sell their farm and go by donkey back for 2 or 3 years to the Library of Alexandria just to learn knowledge, just to understand what life is. Like, think about our questions like, what's the point of life? Maybe if I go to the,
this is actually the most mind-blowing. I don't know why I'm finding I've never thought about how genius the library is.
Yeah.
Like
it's curated. It's like, you want to learn about, religion? Here you go. You want to learn about stories of history? Here you go.
Yeah, a place where we as a community can become more learned, can grow and develop and just be a smarter community. It's just the best place. I'm literally going to the library after this.
We'll go together, man.
I'm donating to my local library. That's wild.
Yeah, and I think libraries are, I don't know, they're so rich in history of like what humans have gone through. And if you look at the history of like how our relationships as humans with books for such a long time has been the thread that's kept societies together. If you wanted to build a government, you needed libraries. If you wanted to have justice systems, you needed books.
You want to be the richest man in the world, build the world's largest online library.
There you go. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how powerful the library is. It's also like one of the most valuable companies on planet Earth.
So the way I see social media, it's Instagram, TikTok, these are modern libraries. These are places that we go to validate our ideas, to find people like us. This is inherently humans trying to connect with one another. And that's it. The greater you can understand this, the more potent you'll become on social media. Your goal as a content creator is to become a phenomenal author and to create a series of content that people are so captivated by, they tell their friends to go to the library just to read your book.
We need to make BOA the world's business library. You want business information, content, the upskills, go to BOA. You find it all there.
It's a modern library.
Man.
It's the modern Alexandria, and you guys are doing it in style.
I love this.
You've already got the marble.
Hey, tell me, because we don't have too much longer, but I wanted to ask at the start, and we just kept rolling with it. You had a real this is a big change in pace, but you had a real rough upbringing.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. Domestic violence, foster care, changing schools is not easy either, especially 36 times or whatever you said. Not many people that come from backgrounds like that have such a positive outlook on the world and personal and a powerful self-belief that they actually build this incredible business and life that you've built. How do you think you did that? Why were you able to escape what sounds like a negative cycle?
Yeah, I think for me, a few things. So looking back at my childhood, and like my youngest memories are pretty awful. You know, I remember waking up, I think I was 3 at the time. I woke up and it was the aftermath of a pretty gnarly party in the early 90s. And there's naked people passed out on mattresses. There's narcotics, there's alcohol, there's needles, all kinds of things.
How old were you?
3. And I wake up and I'm wandering around. I don't know where I am. I'm extremely disoriented. This is my first memory as a child, is picking up a glass of wine and just being like, what is this? Right? So for a child to be in an environment that's not safe, that's not curated, from a very young age, I was extremely exposed to pretty outrageous things, and seeing people when they're drunk and when they're on drugs and all the rest of it. I just remember feeling extremely unsafe, extremely scared, and extremely intimidated as a child from my young age. And the thing is, that was my baseline. So then I learned to become comfortable being uncomfortable. I learned to become adaptive from a very young age. I learned how to, I have another memory where I had to basically, at the age of 6, carry my mother from the bottle store up a train, like railway, like not on the train railway, but like next to it, carrying her home because she didn't know where she was at the age of 6. So I think from a young age, I became very adept at like, I'm responsible. The people around me aren't. They're not even cognitive. They're not even functioning. And I was always like, why am I the only person here thinking rationally? And these are like thoughts I was having when I was like 6, 7, or 8. Is like, why am I the only rational person here who's like cool, calm, collected, and everyone's like blown up over a thing or having a drama or a dispute or what have you? For me, I think looking back on that, it sounds awful maybe to people that are listening to this, but from a young age, I became very capable of dealing with highly stressful, highly difficult situations, which made me, I guess, have a bit of a thick skin. So when things are going awry in the business or people are having a bad day around me, I'm like, this ain't shit. Like, this really ain't shit to like some of the stuff I've seen. And I think, maybe it desensitized me in a number of different ways, but I think it's given me the gifts in business to kind of go, I can make every day a good day because I've been through hell as a kid. And the second part of that as well is like watching my mother and, her journey when I was a child go through all of this trauma. My mind was always like, well, it doesn't have to be this way. If you just didn't drink and you just didn't do these things, life would be a lot better. So I was seeing the mechanisms and the vice and the damage it was doing to her. So for me, I started to unpack the psychology, like, well, why is she doing it? She knows she shouldn't. She knows she needs to stop. She's addicted, all the rest of it. So then when I was, 16, 17, 18, I wasn't really, the kind of kid that was obsessed over like, what are the other teenagers doing? I was like, I want to understand like why my mom did what she did. So I started looking into Tony Robbins. I started going to seminars. I started trying to almost understand my mind and why I was so different through understanding the psychology of why my mother did what she did. And then the further I go in business, the more I just start to see the psychological undertone of why everyone does everything that they do. Because when you're a child, and someone's abusive, like, you know, one of my stepfathers, you become extremely sensitive to cues. So eye contact, you know, facial flushes, facial expressions. I'm like, okay, this person is clearly in a mood. I need to leave the room. You become really sensitive to someone's energy and inflections and all the rest of it. So as harsh and brutal as that sounds, when I'm in a workshop with a client, I'm not only listening to what they're saying, I'm reading their body language. I'm picking up on cues. I'm like, this is making them uncomfortable. This is lighting them up. This is really exciting them, but they're uncomfortable talking about what they're excited about. So like for me, being able to lead a client through a strategic process of building their brand, it's kind of like therapy. They're scared that their business is going to fail. They're scared of what their team think of them. They're scared about implementing their ideas and all the rest of it. So like as a strategist, being able to read people unconsciously and psychologically, being able to deal with high pressure situations, for me, man, it's almost like I've seen it as a gift to be able to do what I do today.
Do you know what your superpower is? It's actually, I mean, you're obviously good at personal branding, but it's actually turning negative, bad things into good ones. It's seeing how a down can cause an equal up. Like, I noticed that when you first said that, you know, I needed to start a business because I was in debt. So I'm in debt. So I'm going to use that downwards force to create an upwards force that helps me pay off that debt. And, you know, describing your childhood, I have a horrible, well, it sounds like what was a horrible and traumatic childhood. But instead of saying, oh, I've had a horrible and traumatic childhood.
Yeah, woe is me.
Woe is me. You're actually saying, well, because I had that, I'm actually far more capable of sustaining stressful situations, being responsible, taking ownership over my life, because you have a tremendous ownership over your life, which probably stemmed from that. You turn bad things into good ones. And even your book, you know, like, you know what's hard? Starting something. So I'm going to create a book that helps people start building their personal brand, makes it easy. You know, it's hard. Here it is. It's actually easy. Like, here's how you do it. Like, that really is super. People like you always, I'm always most impressed with people like you. We spoke about it on your podcast. I was talking about kind of the first generation of business person for each family. All families started poor. All families started poor. No one ever was born. No family ever just started. Even the royal family wasn't royal at one point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Someone had to push that. And that's the first person. That's business person number one. You know, and those people, the first people, they actually go through the most to get where they get. They're the special people. I was even saying, I think on your podcast, I don't know if it was on the podcast or maybe me and you were talking before, but I remember saying like that first business person, that's the special one. And they're rare. They're the rarest one because it's the hardest to do. But it takes people like yourself that can turn negatives into positives, turn disadvantages into advantages, and use those advantages to fuel self-belief.
And I think that in many ways is entrepreneurship. It's looking at something that doesn't exist and looking at levers. If I pull on this lever, that happens. And if I pull on this lever, that happens. And I imagine you were doing this with Cub, right? And there's, you know, in my mind, there's two types of entrepreneurs. I know how you talked about the first starter. And I think, you know, there's those characters in business that they create the thing. And then there's the inherent person who takes over and then continues to scale it. But both things are difficult. They're just different rhythms. Like, I think entrepreneurship is more the starting mechanism. And then there's the business builder who goes, okay, the visionary created this thing, but then they're so obsessed with the next visionary thing that they're not seeing how they can fundamentally scale this thing. So there's the business builder archetype as well, who's the person who's like, I'm actually going to get the train to leave the station on time. And this is Tim Cook versus Steve Jobs. They needed each other. They needed the visionary who's willing to break the rules, you know, crack a few eggs and make something happen. But you need the Tim Cook who's like, okay, cool, Steve, but like, we have to make the train leave the station on time. We have to sell some shit to be able to pay for the next vision. So you need this balance between these two different worlds, I think. But
I completely agree.
Yeah.
We have that. I completely agree.
Who's your Tim Cook, or are you the Tim Cook?
Well, no, I have two. No, I'm definitely not the Tim Cook. I'm the Steve Jobs. I'm definitely not Tim Cook. But no, I have Alice.
Yeah. Shout out to Alice.
Yeah, shout out to Alice, who was the first person that really made CUB possible. And then Holly, who's our current head of Melbourne, and who's soon going to be the COO, is kind of the trajectory she's on. But she kind of keeps the ship running. Alice made all my ideas possible by turning them into operations and systems. And Holly has kind of corporatized us, enabling us to scale more. So
you're that guy that's like, I want the thing, and
Yes.
everyone's like, can't be done. You're like, I want
I'm
it.
the innovator.
I really want it.
can-
And they're
I
like,
can
oh,
see
maybe we could do it
patterns.
this way, and they
Yeah.
build it. Yeah.
But you need those people. But we do need to actually wrap up because Laura's twirling her fingers at me. There's a lot we could talk about. We should start doing free, what's it called? Freestyle podcast where you just go as long as you can, until I feel like, you know what, that's enough. You know,
Until
until
we
I
pass
run
out.
out of yeah. Unless the person's horrible, and I'm like, look, it's 10-minute podcast today. Sorry, man, I got somewhere to go.
Yeah,
But-
the audio fucked up. Sorry,
But
can't post
why
it.
don't you share your Instagram thing so people can check you out?
Yeah, if you just go on Instagram or even Google for that matter, and you just type in Dain Walker, DAIN, and you'll find me.
Or if you want to do it the long way, you can go to cub.club/podcast and you can get in contact with Dain there.
Do it that way.
You can also get a link to his book, link to his podcast, read his favorite book, which I'm assuming is his own. But you put another one up there too, and other great content from Dain and our other incredible guests. But thank you, man. This was awesome.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much, and let's
I appreciate
keep
you.
climbing those 15 hours.
I'll see you at the library. See ya.